very pleased to have Marcin Matelski here with us. He is an urban beekeeper for the past 7 years and maintains over 40 hives in Chicago and the suburbs. He teaches beekeeping classes, leads workshops, and has organized beekeeping seminars in the past, and serves as the head beekeeper at the Garfield Park Conservatory in Chicago. We're very happy to have him here as Riverside explores some of the issues surrounding urban beekeeping. Marcin?
Can everybody hear me? Good. Thank you for having me. I really enjoy talking about bees. As Rob has mentioned, I've been keeping bees for 7 years, but my experience goes when I was a teenager. My grandpa, when he retired, he bought a farm up in Wisconsin, and it's just beekeeping was one of those chores at a time that I had to do during the summer. You know, cutting up wood for the fireplace for the winter, gardening. Beekeeping was one of those. I wish now it would have been a chore, but you know, life goes on. But that was my first experience to beekeeping. About 2009, a friend of mine told me that he was gonna keep bees in the city, and I said, wow, well, why can't I? So started exploring that option. In 2010, started keeping bees on my own. Started with 2 hives. It was supposed to be a hobby. It became an addiction from day one. There was no hobby. It was just, it's an addiction. I gotta feed it. I gotta do more of it. I gotta just more and more and more. Just completely fell in love with bees. And then last year in 2015, opportunity came around from Garfield Park Conservatory. They were looking for a new head beekeeper. I applied. I got the job, and I'm loving it. There's absolutely nothing else I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to incorporate bees somehow into my my life for the rest, you know, as long as I live. Before I start, are any of you beekeepers? Are any of you thinking about beekeeping? All right, so let me just tell you that there's no wrong or right way to keep bees. There's as many ways to keep bees as there are beekeepers, and everybody has an individual style, individual method to keep them. What I'm going to share with you is some of the science of bees, some of what has worked for me, what didn't work for me, what I like to do, what I don't like to do. But don't use that as a sort of a Bible. It's more of a guideline that I found that works for me. So I'm sure if you ask another beekeeper, he's going to have another opinion about the same thing that I did, and there's nothing wrong with that. So just remember, as many ways to keep bees as there are beekeepers. And before I go on, just want to make a little spiel. On this Saturday, March 19th, we're having our 7th annual Bee Forum at Garfield Park Conservatory. We have 3 speakers, 3 scheduled speakers, and we're working around this general idea of creating a community of beekeeping. So beekeepers sharing their experiences, what worked for them, what didn't, working together to improve overall health of the honeybees, because you might have heard that honeybees are not doing so hot right now. So there's an issue with them, and we're trying to figure out how we can improve that in our local area. When I say honeybees, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Just give me an answer. Honey, stinging. Honey, stinging. Okay. What's that? Buzzing.
Pollinators.
There you go. That's not a honeybee, but it's a bee. But bees in general, and honeybees, are bees. Their main function is pollination. Their job is to transfer pollen from one plant to the other to pollinate it. And so there's a fruit or whatever it is being grown, a crop. That's their main function. It's estimated that in America, honeybee pollination is responsible for about $15 billion industry. So $15 billion worth of our crops are pollinated by bees, by honeybees, and about $3 billion by native wild bees. Estimations are about every third bite you take is somehow dependent on honeybees. That food had to be pollinated, and honeybees were probably the primary pollinator for that. So that's the main thing they do. Honey is just a byproduct that we as humans enjoy. This is, like I said, it's a $15 billion industry, and this is a very typical life for a honeybee. They'll start their life in California, and right now, we're at the tail end of it. 80% of the world's almonds are grown in California, in Central Valley, California. There's about 1 million acres of trees being grown over there in orchards, and every acre requires 2 hives, honeybee hives, to achieve adequate pollination. California has about 500,000 hives in state, which means the rest of them have to be trucked over from as far as Florida and Maine and Oregon, wherever they are, for about a 3-week period, starting about mid-February or so, to pollinate almonds. After that, they get trucked over to whatever the pollination contract the beekeeper has. That's where they go. But beekeepers get paid for this. Obviously, it's a service they provide. But the bees do get stressed. Right? Moving bees and putting them on a single crop limits their nutritional intake, and it stresses them out. And some of our problems come from that. But our agricultural system is dependent on honeybees. There's no way around it. There's the way we grow crops, there are not enough wild bees, native bees, to pollinate them in a way that it's required by humans. This is what your breakfast looks like with honeybee pollination. This is what it would look like without honeybees. So your cranberries, nuts, toast, jam, even the creamer, even though bees don't pollinate cows, but they do pollinate alfalfa, which is then fed to cows, which create milk, which is used for your creamer. So, our diet, like I said, about every third bite is dependent on honeybees for pollination. And you might have heard that, lately beekeeping, especially urban beekeeping, has become very, very popular. I'm not kidding you. This is an actual photo from a fashion show in New York last year, where this is what we call the beekeeper's veil, and I have an example of it here. That was part of the fashion show, and as you can see, it's everywhere. This is the White House, and I think 4 or 5 years ago, Michelle Obama, when she started her urban garden, decided to have honeybees in it, and they have hives. The reason why it's raised so tall is because they have a dog, and that dog used to sniff around the bees, and they wanted to keep it safe. So they raised it off the ground. This is about 6 feet off the ground. So this is not normal for most urban beekeeping, but that's what it is at the White House. And they use the honey to make their own beer and give away the souvenirs to visiting heads of the state. Honeybees. A lot of people confuse any flying insect with a bee. We've all heard that. Oh, it's a bee, it's a bee, it's a bee. That's not the case. The main difference between honeybees and yellowjackets and wasps or hornets is that honeybees are, you guys can see, are hairy. Every part of their body has hairs on it, other than wings. And the function for the hairs is to attract pollen grains and then transfer them from flower to flower to improve pollination. Yellowjackets, wasps have very little hair. They're not pollinators. Their function is they're meat eaters. They eat other insects. They're the ones that will go after your barbecue and your picnic and your food during your, when you're enjoying your backyard cookout. Not honeybees. Honeybees are interested in pollen and nectar, which they get from plants. Yellowjackets will go after that if there's nothing else available or if it's easy pickings. There's 3 characters, 3 individuals in a hive that all have roles and all are important and all sort of gel together to create this perfect harmony of a colony of honeybees. The first one, it's this one, it's the queen. There's usually 1 per colony. There are instances where there can be 2 of them, but 9 out of 10 times there's only 1 queen per colony. She's a female. She's a fertile female, which means she's been fertilized by drones, by males. She can lay 2 types of eggs, fertilized and unfertilized. fertilized eggs will become workers, which is this bee. Unfertilized eggs will become drones, which are these ones. Queens and workers both have stingers. Queen is very unlikely to sting you. Workers can sting, but unlike yellowjackets, honeybees sting you once, and because of our skin composition, they leave the stinger inside, and when they try to get away, their guts get kind of spilled out and they die. So for honeybees, it's sort of a suicide mission. It's a very defensive mechanism instead of aggressive behavior. Yellowjackets, hornets, wasps can do it multiple times. They can sting you multiple times. So, queen, usually one. She lays about 2,000 eggs in a day during the peak of the season, which is about her body weight. She's think of the queen as sort of the heart of the colony. The bees cannot live without her. The queen cannot live without the bees. Her main job is to think of her as an egg-laying machine. Her main job is to create new population, to create consistent production of bees. But everything else in the hive is regulated by workers. These are workers. They comprise anywhere from 90 to 95% of the population within the hive. The rest are drones. Workers are the ones that are responsible for stimulating the queen to lay more eggs or less eggs. They're responsible for making decisions when to forage, what to forage, when to build comb, when to clean the house, when to produce honey. Any kind of decision-making process is generated and controlled by the workers. Queen is basically a slave to them. But they have this function where one cannot live without the other. Workers as a colony will not survive without a queen, and the queen cannot survive without the workers. Workers are responsible for grooming her, keeping her clean, keeping her well fed, so everything kind of works together in the perfect harmony. Drones don't have stingers, so you guys can see the queen and the workers, their abdomen is kind of pointed, and that's the idea behind that is so they can expel the stinger if there's a need. Drones don't have any stingers. They cannot sting you, so their abdomens are more rounded. Their eyes are bigger, and they're bigger than the workers. They're fatter, they're bigger. Their main function, as far as we know, their main function is to mate with a virgin queen and pass on the genetics of the colony and spread the genetic diversity within a given population within the area. After the mating process, the drones die. Their deed is done. They're no longer needed. It's the end of the life for them. Also, drones, usually most colonies will kick out drones when it's time to settle down for winter, just because drones don't do any of the housework. They're, I don't want to say lazy, but you can say that. They will get kicked out when winter comes. So starting September, October, depending where you are, how strong the colony is, the drones will start getting kicked out because at this point they become a wasted resource. They don't bring in any value to the colony anymore. Usually the virgin queens, the colonies produce virgin queens May, June, July, not so much towards the end of the year. So they get kicked out. The colony goes into winter just with workers and hopefully a healthy, young, laying, fully functioning queen. The colony of bees, anywhere from 25,000 to 65,000 bees can occupy a hive and then create a colony. How many bees there will be depends on your location. So that means how many resources there are available and how many other insects are competing with them for those resources. The more resources, the less competition, the stronger the colony, the better it will do. And obviously, the ability to lay eggs is somewhat dependent on the availability of resources. So the more resources, the more eggs, the bigger the colony. Sort of a domino effect. This is sort of a very simplified stages in the life of a typical worker bee. So on the queen, like I said, lays 2 types of eggs. Fertilized becomes worker, unfertilized becomes drones. Queen will go into a comb and lay eggs. And for the first 3 days, that egg is always an egg. It doesn't matter if it's a worker, queen, or a drone. It will always be an egg. On day 3, that egg hatches. So these are the eggs here, and this is the hatched egg, and it becomes a larva. So that egg hatches. At that point, it starts giving off a smell, a pheromone. And think of honeybee pheromones sort of as a baby crying and mother responding to it. When that larva is giving off a pheromone, that stimulates the nurse bees that are within the hive, that larva has to be fed and kept warm. From the time the egg hatches, so on day 3, to the time when it becomes pupa, it's about 6 days, that larva is fed about 8,000 times. So about 1,500 to 1,800 times a day, there's a nurse bee going in there and feeding it and feeding and feeding and feeding and keeping it warm and keeping it moist. This is just a progression of older larvae. You guys can see, maybe, hopefully see, as that from the egg it becomes and fills the whole cell. This is the stage of the life where bees put a capping over the open cells, and at that point the larva is fed all it's going to be fed for the rest of its life. At this point, hopefully it's healthy enough and it's not diseased and any of those stuff. It will start going through a metamorphosis, and it will start growing its wings, eyes, muscles, body organs, getting it hairs and pigmentation, all that stuff, and that stage lasts about 12 days. So 3 days for an egg, 6 days for a larva, 12 days for pupa. So 21 days from the time, if the queen laid eggs today, 21 days later, that egg will become a hatching adult. And this is a hatching female worker. When it's time for them to hatch out, they'll start piercing through the pupa underneath. So this is the capping right here. They'll start piercing through that capping. They'll come out. For the first few hours, they're sort of dazed and confused and getting their bearings. As soon as they start maturing and getting hardened up, the first thing she'll do is she'll go back to that cell and she'll start cleaning it out. So she goes back to work almost immediately from the time she's born. That's where busy as a bee comes from. There's no downtime in a honeybee colony. So she'll go back to that cell, start cleaning it out, and when that cell is cleaned out, there's a pheromone that they give off that notifies the queen, wherever she is in the hive, notifies the queen that, hey, I've just prepared this new cell for you. Come here and lay an egg in it again so we can continue the cycle. So by doing this, the bees stimulate the queen to come back to that previous spot and lay an egg, and the cycle continues. Does that make sense? If the bees are sick or diseased, or their pheromone is not as strong, that starts interfering with their normal function, and that's when issues start becoming more and more present, and it may require beekeeper intervention. What bees need? Very simple. Clean food, clean air, clean home, clean water, just like humans, right? Very simple. If you think about urban beekeeping, the most important thing I would say is access. The easier the access you have to the hive, the better off you will be in the long run. I've had hives when I put them and I had to walk 50 yards through a muddy field, and when it's April and you're up to your knees in mud and you're carrying heavy equipment, it's not the best thing. So the easier the access, the better off you will be. Sun. Bees are stimulated by heat and by light. So the more, in my opinion, the more sun you can give them, the better off. Which is kind of counterintuitive, because when you look at feral bees, they live in trees and cavities, and they may not get full sun or even any sun. But there are, not so much research, but there is suggestive evidence by beekeepers that shows that the more sun you give them and you manage them, the better off they will be. When they're in shade, when there's moisture, all those humidity, all those things kind of start adding up, and issues start becoming more and more visible. So if you ask me, the more sun, the better. But there's as many ways to keep bees as there are beekeepers. Just remember that. Clean water. Bees forage anywhere from 2 to 3 miles of their nest, so about an 8,000-acre radius or so. But they like their water source to be within a quarter mile of them. Not right next to a hive, but I would say 20, 25 feet away from the hive. Providing a clean water source for bees is optimal, and I've seen it myself that bees will utilize it. Why that's also important is that bees are loyal to a food source, whether that be nectar, pollen, or water. They will keep coming back to it until it's exhausted. If it's not there anymore, they'll switch to something different. So when they find your neighbor's swimming pool, they'll continue coming to it until it's not there anymore. And I had a neighbor who had a swimming pool, and it was very hard for me to convince him to drain his swimming pool. I had to figure out a way to trick my bees to find the water source that I wanted them to find. And there are ways to do that. What I did was I had a bird bath similar to this, and I just kept putting honey in it to sweeten sort of the deal for them. And once one of them found it, it notified its housemate, and so on and so on. It took about 2 weeks or so, but the bees finally gave up my neighbor's swimming pool, and they went to this water source.
Wasn't the chlorine a deterrent?
There is something of the smell, yeah. They are attracted to smell, so bleach, chlorine will definitely attract them. Yeah, it's not necessarily good for them, but smell will attract them, yes. Secretions from trees and shrubs, so nectar and pollen. If you're in an urban setting, you don't have much choice over that, where you're going to put your hive. You're going to put it in your backyard, or your neighbors, or your friends, or family member. But the more variety there is, the more plants there are in the area, the better overall health of the colony. The more nutritional sources there are for them, the better off they will be. I've read that in order to produce a healthy honeybee colony, bees should get their pollen, their protein, from about 50 different sources. So as much variety as possible, and continuous supply. So something that blooms April, May, and then something that blooms May and June, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And then pollen and nectar. And pollen is their protein source, and they turn that into bee bread. And bee bread is what they feed to the young developing larvae in that 6-day period from the time when the egg hatches to the time when it becomes a pupa. They feed it bee bread, and bee bread is pollen with some nectar or honey on it, sort of fermented protein source. It contains all the essential amino acids, vitamins, minerals that a healthy bee needs to develop. And then nectar. Nectar is secretion from trees that really has no benefit to the trees or plants, but it's sort of a reward for the bee to come in and pollinate that specific plant. And if you pollinate me, you'll get this reward. So it's a beneficial relationship. What do beekeepers need? Good attitude, obviously. Be aware that you are dealing with a stinging insect, and there is a potential that you will get stung. So if you are allergic, be aware of that. Talk to your family, talk to your doctor, get tested. If you can, there are things you can do to lower the risk of getting stung, but nothing is 100% proof. Beekeeper's clothing, so veil, protecting your face, light color clothing. Bees are attracted to darker colors, so anything that's lighter will attract them less. Anything that smells nice will attract bees. They can sense, their communication is done by pheromones. So imagine if this is just us yelling at each other. That's how we would communicate. That's how bees communicate, by smell. So anything that smells nice, they'll come and they'll check it out. Don't eat bananas for about an hour or so before you go beekeeping, just because when a honeybee stings you, the pheromone that is associated with that sting sort of smells like a banana, and they can associate that with an alarm pheromone, and it can cause them to come and check you out in more numbers than you would like. Doesn't mean they're going to come and sting you, but that means they're just going to come around you and buzz you and try to smell you and see what's going on. So definitely don't eat bananas before you go beekeeping. There are veils you can, jackets you can buy, protective clothing. They range in price anywhere from a single veil is $20. A jacket can cost as much as $250. So it all depends how much you want to spend to feel protected. Most beekeepers, not everyone, but most beekeepers tend to get away with veil. Doing inspections during warm, sunny days, no wind, no thunderstorms, anything like that, between hours of 10 and 2 o'clock seems to be optimal. It's just at those times, that's when most foragers are out looking for food sources and they're not in a hive. So instead of dealing with 60,000 bees, now you're dealing with 30,000 bees that are nurse bees that are more chill and more, hey, how you doing? That kind of. So, beekeepers' tools. These two are probably the most important. This is what we call a hive tool, and you cannot beekeep without having it. It's basically a crowbar with a flat end on one end, with a flat surface on one end, and you use that to pry open the boxes and pull out frames, because bees will propolis everything within a hive. And propolis is a tree resin that the bees collect, bring into the hive, and it has two functions. One, it's glue, so that any air gaps, anything that moves that shouldn't move, they'll propolize it together to keep it steady. Also, propolis is sort of an extension of their immune system. It's got highly antibacterial, antimicrobial properties. So they will collect propolis and they will coat every wooden surface within the hive over a period of time to sort of discourage bacteria to live within that structure that they're occupying. You cannot do beekeeping without this. This could be a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, whatever it is, but these are widely available, about $4 from a beekeeping supply store. Smoker. Some people use them, most people use them, some don't. It'll be your decision. I recommend you get a smoker. Bees, humans have found that bees have this wrong relationship with smoke, and most people think that what smoke does is confuses the bees. Maybe somewhat, but what it does is when you give them a puff of smoke, you're masking their communication. So basically you're interrupting whatever is going on in the hive, and now instead of being focused on you, now they're focused on trying to reestablish your communication lines. The best way I can describe it is when I talked to my 12-year-old nephew, I told him, look, just look at it this way. If I took away your Wi-Fi or your cell phone, you would not know what's going on around you. And this is sort of what we're doing to bees. For those 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, however long you are in the hive, you're giving them a puff of smoke, and you're sort of cutting their communications, and they're more focused on that, trying to figure out, is the queen here? Where is she? Can we find her? Is she safe? And then looking for other housemaids and trying to, what's going on? Why can't we, why isn't our communication happening the way it's supposed to be? The equipment. The Langstroth hive. So the way we know beekeeping, the way you guys are probably familiar with these wooden square boxes, is fairly new. It's about 107 years old or so. In 1852, Reverend Lorenzo Langstroth in Philadelphia discovered what we call now bee space. And bee space is about 5/16 of an inch. It's anywhere between 1/4 of an inch to 3/8. By 5/16 is the sweet spot. And it's enough of a space where two bees can pass next to each other without bumping into each other. So he discovered that by utilizing bee space, he can manipulate those hives to his liking. So he can grow them to bigger size, and bigger size means a bigger honey crop for him, for a beekeeper. So he discovered, in 1852, he discovered and patented the Langstroth hive, and that's why it's called the Langstroth hive. It's called after his honor. And it's, I would say 90 to 95% of the hives that are used in the United States right now are Langstroth hives. There are some other hives, top bar hives, warrior hives that are getting more and more popular, but Langstroth hives are definitely, every commercial beekeeper uses Langstroth hives. It utilizes the equipment to the best way it possibly can. So there are drawbacks to it, there are benefits to it. These two boxes on the bottom, If you can see, they're 9 5/8 deep. When that box is full of honey, it can weigh anywhere between 80 to 100 pounds, depending on what the wood is made out of. If it's cedar, it's going to be lighter. If it's made out of maple or oak, it's going to be heavier wood, so it can weigh up to 100 pounds when it's full of honey. These two boxes right here are what we call mediums, or Illinois supers, and they're 6 5/8 deep. And the weight of them is anywhere between 35 to about 45 pounds, depending on the type of wood that is used to design. So these are mainly used by commercial beekeepers or people who are looking for honey production, because you can use less equipment to get the same amount of volume out of it. These are widely popular among backyard beekeepers and hobby beekeepers just because of the weight savings. The number one injury that beekeepers complain about is bad back. No doubt about it. So yeah, more of these, less equipment you have to buy and you have to maintain. More of these, better for your back, but more equipment you have to maintain and buy and put together. It all has pros and cons. This is what it looks like when bees build their own comb. This is, you guys can see, it's just their building comb. So we put them in these wooden square boxes, but if you look at a feral hive, nothing in nature is square. There's always roundness and curves and turns and all that sort of thing. So this is what happens when you let bees build their own comb. Though this behavior, what we see here, especially right here, is called festooning, and it's where bees are basically hanging right onto each other, and they're measuring the space from top to bottom, side to side, and they're architects and engineers and one, and they're measuring the space, and they know how much comb they need to build to fill that void. In order to build that comb, they have to consume nectar, or honey, or sugar water if beekeepers feed them. But whatever they're consuming, carbohydrates, they need to consume about 8 pounds or so of carbohydrates to produce a pound of wax. So wax is highly valuable. Bees will not build it unless there's a need for it. There's no way they will waste time and resources to build something that they don't need. They're not like humans. They don't need a 2,500,000 square feet home when you can do it in a 1,500 square feet. So they'll build comb when they need to. Most of the colonies in our area build comb in springtime, so between April through about July. After that, they've usually reached their peak in numbers, and whatever they have, they usually feel satisfied with, and it's very hard to get a colony to build comb unless you stimulate them to create it. And there are ways to do that, but that's not basic beekeeping. I don't want to confuse you too much. I guess to end it, because this is what they build. This is the main function of the comb, is for the queen to lay eggs in it to produce baby bees, so the colony cycle can continue. The reason why I have this here is that wax is like a sponge. It absorbs all the toxins that the bees bring into the hive, beekeepers put in the hive, or just float in from the environment. Most research tells us now that you should replace 20% of your wax every 5 years. So if you have a hive and it has 10 of those frames, every year you should get 20% of the wax out of it. So every 5 years you're starting with new wax. The reason why is that, like I said, it accumulates all the toxins, and there is research that shows that the more bees are exposed to the toxins, the less healthy they are, the less healthy new generations they can raise, and it just accumulates. So you can't keep toxins out of it. It will be there whether you let them build natural comb like this, or whether you provide them with foundations, sheet of foundation, whether that be plastic or wax. Doesn't matter. It will accumulate wax, toxins. But I prefer to do it this way. I've been keeping for 7 years, and 6 out of those 7 years, I've let bees build their own comb. So it's worked for me. Some people will disagree with that, and that's totally fine. The reason also why I let them build their own comb is because so basically imagine if this was just filled with a sheet of thin foundation that goes right in the middle of this frame right here, and it acts as a guide for the bees to build their comb. So it acts for them as a guide to pull out those cells and build it deeper. that sheet of foundation is about $1 or so. So if you have 40 hives and each hive requires 50, 60 frames, it starts adding up. It's also, I like to let bees, there's something cool when you see that, you let them build and you see that behavior festooning and bees, you kind of swing that frame and the bees just waving in the wind. I'm a fan of that, but there's nothing wrong with using foundation. This is how, if you're going to start beekeeping, this is how you would, most common way to start bees. This is what we call the package of bees. This is a 3-pound package, and there's 10 to 12,000 bees in there when you buy them. Most of our packages come from California. 70% of our packages, not just our packages, but 70% of the packages that are produced in the United States, which there's about 500,000 packages produced every single year. There's a demand for, actually there's a demand for more, but that's what, as an industry, that's what we can create, that many bees. 70% of that comes from California, and the 30% of it comes from southeastern United States. So Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, Florida, Georgia. The most common way for most beekeepers, I would say 95% of the beekeepers start out this way. It's a package. The bees are literally shaken into this package. They can come from as many as 5, 6 different hives that are not related to the queen that comes in this queen cage. This queen could have been raised somewhere in Hawaii, shipped to California, bees shaken into this package, queen installed, this feeder can put in. It more than likely contains high fructose corn syrup, sometimes sugar water solution, and then it gets put on a trailer and it gets delivered throughout the United States. So bees spend about 3 to 4 days in that cage with the queen. Hopefully they get used to her. Her smell, because they know they're queenless, they can't smell any other queen in there. Hopefully they get used to her. You install those bees in your hive, and hopefully it's a happy ever after. I've seen research that indicates that as many as 18% of the packages that you install will abscond. So they will leave within the first 2 weeks of an installation. So you just spend $120 and the bees will leave. And that could be many reasons. Some of it could be because they don't like the queen, but it could be they don't like the area, ants are bothering them, there's not enough resources in the area, but it's not uncommon for packages to take off and abscond and maybe go into your neighbor's attic. It's not unheard of. Let's go on. So, till now, I've been talking about all these fun things about bees and stinging and good stuff, honey. You might have heard that bees are not doing so great. There's a lot of issues that they're facing. These are just some of them that are facing. Pesticides, obviously weather has a great effect on bees. Later, longer winters, tough winters will definitely lower the number, or not lower them, but sort of pick out the strongest and not so much the weakest, which may be a good thing in the long term, but for average beekeeper, when you have 2 hives and a long winter just takes 2 of them out, it's not so good for you. You're not thinking about overall, adding to the overall survival of the fittest. You want your bees to survive. Totally understandable. But weather is has a great influence on bees. Bee food supply, so if you're in an area where there's monocrop grown, they're getting a single source of food. It's not, they can survive, but it's not the greatest. Think of if you were eating fish for all your life. Sure, you can survive, but it's not as fun as eating kale and spinach and steak and all the other stuff. But all of these things are not as bad as, where is that? Right here, this thing, varroa mite. This is what a varroa mite looks like. This right here, and on bees. The number one reason why bees are in the state they are in, it's an exotic pest. It's not native to the honeybee, the western honeybee, the European honeybee. It jumped host somewhere about 100 years ago or so from its Asian cousin, the Asian honeybee. And the Asian honeybee has co-evolved with varroa mite for millions of years, and it's got built-in defensive mechanism. The European honeybee has no built-in defensive mechanism. So when this parasitic mite was first discovered in the United States in late 1980s, it wiped out a lot of colonies. I mean, the numbers just dropped significantly, and beekeepers could not figure out why this is happening. Scientists got on board, started figuring out. They discovered that this mite is here. It was first found in Wisconsin, in a hive in Wisconsin, commercial beekeeper. And by, I think, 1992, it was found in every single state other than Hawaii. Hawaii didn't get it till 2008, I believe, which varroa mite cannot fly, cannot swim. It cannot live without its host for more than, I think, 8 to 10 days. So it had to be human transportation to Hawaii, and there was a quarantine on bees going to Hawaii. They were supposed to be screened and all that stuff, but somehow one slipped, 10, however many slipped through, and they've established themselves. And varroa mite is in every single country where European honeybees are kept, except Australia, because there's still an island, there's quarantine on it, so they're checking shipping containers that come from Asia or from Europe for honeybee swarms, and if there are any found, they destroy them on the spot just to avoid the varroa mite and all the viruses that it carries with it. So why is varroa mite bad? Because it does double damage. It does damage to the adults. What it will do, it will pierce your skin, and it will vector in viruses. It will expose your skin to viruses that are in the air, spores that other bees may be carrying, and they're just accumulating and weakening your immune system. But that's not as bad as what they do to the pupa. At this stage, that pupa is pretty defenseless. And at this stage, that's where mites go into the cell and they reproduce. So a single mite enters a cell. It's a female, it's a foundress, it's a fertile female that's been fertilized. Goes into a cell, starts laying eggs. The first egg it lays is a male, and after about 30 hours or so, it will lay eggs, more and more eggs, and those will be females. The male and females mate, so it's heavy inbreeding, but while they're mate, they also defecate, and they also start feeding on that pupa. So from day one, that pupa is being compromised. Its immune system is being compromised, and it's being weakened. And then they just, on the adults, they finish up the job. So if not kept under control, varroa mites will wipe out the colony. No doubt about it. We remove varroa mites from our hives, and there are no hives in the United States. If you're a beekeeper, you're a mite keeper. It's a given. There's no way you can be a mite-free beekeeper. Unless you're isolated, somewhere on an island, and you wipe out every single mite and nothing else is coming in, it's just impossible. They hitchhike rides on different bees. They also have been found to hitchhike rides on bumblebees and carpenter bees, so it's not just honeybees. Though when bees congregate on the flower, they'll just jump from one bee to another and go on their journey. This is what a mite would look like on your body. So imagine walking around with that, flying around with that, constantly sucking, piercing your skin and sucking out your blood and exposing you to all the viruses. Not the greatest thing in the world. What can you do about it? Hopefully you have bees, a strain of bees that is able to defend itself against varroa mite, that it's showing high sensitive hygienic behavior, and it can detect varroa mite, and it can groom them off their bodies and throw them out, dispose of them from the hive. That's not always the case. That trait comes at a cost. High hygienic behavior comes at a cost of honey production or brood production or pollination. It's, if you pick on one trait, something's got to give on the other end. It's sort of a tug war. So if you go this way, this trait is going to give in. So it's hard to find a happy medium about what you as a beekeeper want and what the bees as a colony need. There are chemicals that are approved to use within a hive. Problem with that is some of them are synthetic, and they get they get absorbed by the wax, and varroa mites have shown resistance to some of them. The very first synthetic miticides that were used are almost useless against varroa mites. In 25 years, they have co-evolved to the point where they show resistance, where those synthetic pesticides, you either have to higher up the dosage, or it's not doing its job. There are organic acids or essential oils you can use. It all comes at a cost. Some of them you can use when there's honeys for human consumption on the hive. Some of them require multiple treatments. Some of them are hard on the queens, will mess the queen pheromone, and the bees will think they're queenless. They'll try to replace the queen. Some of them are hard on the brood. It will kill off the larvae and the pupa. So there are drawbacks to it, but no doubt about it, bees, if you leave varroa mites, if you let them run wild, they will wipe out the colony. If not in the first year, by second year, it's almost a given a colony will perish. Having said that, I have never used chemicals in my hives. It's a struggle. It's a hard job, but there's things I can do to promote the health of a honeybee colony, but that comes at a cost too. The things that I implement come at a cost of honey production. So my hives are not producing the amount of honey that some of the other beekeepers can produce if they use chemical treatments. And it's all personal choice. When I started this 7 years ago, I chose not to use chemicals if I don't have to. And so far, it's been working. I will tell you this: the last 4 years, it is getting harder and harder to keep bees in the city. Every year, we're losing more and more hives, and varroa is becoming more and more resistant to whatever we're throwing at them. So it's a fun hobby, but it's getting more and more frustrating.
Do the mites have any natural enemies?
No. The natural enemy would be a coexistence within the Asian honeybee. They have a co-relationship where the pest will not wipe out the host. With European honeybees, the pest will kill off the host. So, all right, let's talk about something fun, honey. After I've just put you down, but that's the reality of beekeeping. I'm varroa mite. It's the #1 issue with beekeeping, no doubt about it, worldwide. And Australia is preparing for it. They know they're going to get it at some point. They just don't know when. But they're preparing for it. They're educating their beekeepers how to spot symptoms of varroa mites, what to do about them, how to monitor the levels, and if they reach above certain economic threshold, how to fix that issue. Honey. Honey is dependent on the food source, the nectar source that is in your area. So in the city, our main nectar source are linden trees, which bloom, I would say, second week of June for about 5 or 6 weeks. If you guys remember, last year our June was the second wettest on record. It rained every other day. So our honey crop was not the greatest in the city. When it rains every other day, if the tree is producing nectar today, when it rains tomorrow, that rain, if it's heavy rain, it will wash off the nectar. So on the third day, when it's warm enough and it's sunny and the bees are flying, there's nothing for them to forage on. So they're making empty flights. Basically, they're expending more energy than what they're collecting and bringing back to the hive. So our honey production last year really, really suffered. But that's not everywhere. There are beekeepers who have had not great years, but they've did okay. It all depends what's blooming in your area and the time when it's blooming. Like I said, in the city, we're heavily dependent on linden trees. I mean, there's some clover and there's wildflowers and backyard gardens, but remember, bees forage about 8,000 acres or so. And by my estimate, by my guess, I would say there's about more than 500, less than 1,000 beekeepers in the city. So we're all sort of on top of each other, and we're all competing for the very limited resources. And there's also wild and native bees that also need those resources. So there's a lot of competition. Weather is incorporating. It's creating all sorts of issues, stress, nutritional stress. Last year wasn't a great year for beekeeping. So if last year was your first year, don't get discouraged. It does get better. So honey is the flavor, the characteristics of it will depend on the nectar source that is in the area blooming when the bees are collecting it. Just to make you appreciate honey more, it's estimated that a single honeybee will produce about a 12th of a teaspoon of honey in her lifetime. And the colony collectively has to fly about 55,000 miles to produce a single pound of honey. So next time you taste honey, appreciate what you're tasting, because there's a chance 7 bees gave up their life just for you to enjoy it. So honey, honey is this product that is very special and should be valued for how it's created and for what it brings to humans. Some of the other products of the hive. So honey here, but obviously beeswax. Bees produce bee wax. Propolis, which I've talked about, which is basically tree resin. We call it tree resin when it's outside the hive. When it's inside the hive, it's propolis. It's used by furniture makers as a furniture polish. It's used in toothpaste and deodorants for its antimicrobial, antibacterial properties. Bee bread or pollen, which is collected and used. It has shown to be, if you have allergies to whatever's blooming in your area, if you start eating small amounts of pollen, your immune system has a potential to build up immunity to whatever is causing your allergies at a time. And then royal jelly. Royal jelly is what the bees feed to the very young larva and to the queen for her entire life. It's a highly nutritious, highly valuable food source. It's collected by humans, and it's believed to be a fountain of youth. I've tried it. I did not get any younger. If you try it, you might get. So if you do get younger, let me know. It's pricey, but it's also, it takes bees of special age to produce royal jelly, and it's highly, it requires a lot of resources to produce the royal jelly. So I'm not a fan of producing royal jelly because bees do get sacrificed for it, but there's obviously a market for it.
I've seen it's about 55 minutes.
What's that?
It's about 7:55.
Okay. So I've showed you guys the difference between worker, drone, and a queen. Can you guys see if you're paying attention? Can anybody spot a queen? Is that where you got it? Yeah, that's a queen right here. That's a worker. All of these are workers. That's a drone. So look at the eyes of drone compared to the eyes of the worker. Way bigger, right? Very bug eyes. And the reason why they have bigger eyes is that when they're out flying and they're searching for the virgin queen, they need those eyes to locate her better. Once they get close enough, they can smell her. She gives up her own unique signature pheromone smell. But until they're close enough, they need to spot her up in the air, 100 and 150 feet up in the air. They have to spot her. And just as an added bonus, a queen will mate with about 12 to 16 drones on average. Hopefully, all of those drones are genetically diversified, so every single drone is not related in any way to the queen or in any way to each other. The more genetic diversity it is with a honeybee colony, the more prosperous they will be, the more viable they will be, the healthier they are, the better they'll function. There's study after study that shows genetic diversity within honeybee colonies is a good thing. I've heard that there's about 2.7 million colonies in the United States, managed honeybee colonies, and our genetic lineage can be traced to about 900 queens. So 2.7 million colonies, each colony has a queen. All those queens can be traced back to about 900 queens that are produced by commercial queen breeders. Well, that's good or bad? I don't know. I think that's bad. I think the more genetic diversity we have, the better. But that's the reality of beekeeping. And with that, thank you for your attention, and I'll open up for questions. Yes?
You will hear stories that a beekeeper will be called when a feral hive is found, and he will capture those bees. Can he introduce them to a domestic hive?
Yeah, I mean, that feral bee probably,
You want to repeat the question?
Okay. So the question was, you'll hear stories that beekeeper is called to capture a swarm or a feral hive, and can that colony be introduced to domestic hive that he's keeping? Is that right? Honeybees are not native to North America. They were brought over by early settlers in 1600s. You know, the Native Americans used to call them the white man's fly because they've never seen them before. It's something they've never been exposed to. So they're not really feral. They more than like, I mean, we know that they escaped from a domesticated setting at some point. But yes, you can, if you capture a swarm or you do a cut of a feral swarm, as long as you know they're healthy and there's signs as a beekeeper, you'll know they're healthy, you can introduce them to your existing apiary. It shouldn't be an issue. If they're sick, be aware, because some of the diseases can spread very quickly throughout the apiary. So, yes?
How much time does this hobby take for a beginner?
Oh, God.
And what type of time?
How much time do you have? If you have two, and if you're gonna keep hives, I recommend having 2 hives, just because if one is doing weak, you have another one that you can add on and sort of boost that up. If you have 1 hive and it's failing, you're pretty much on your own, and chances are it's not gonna survive. Having said that, an inspection will take you about 15 to 25 minutes, depending on what it is you're looking for. I would say dedicate 1.5 hours average per week between April and October. Some weeks you'll do more, some weeks you'll do less. But I would say up to 2 hours per week. But it's all the other stuff you do behind it, the research, the education. The bees did something and you're trying, what the hell are you doing? That's what takes up a lot of your time. So, but I would say between 1 hour to 2 hours on average per week.
At one time or daily?
No. I inspect my hives about 10 days every 2 weeks. But I know beekeepers who go in their hives every 3 days because they want to be in there, they want to see what the bees are doing. And there's something to that. I mean, the more you are in there, hopefully the more you are learning. And you can read all the books you want, watch all the videos you can, but the bees are the best teachers. And if you can interpret what they're telling you, you'll become better. But there's also a downside to that. The more you are in there, the more you stress them out. So, you're trying to find a balance, what you want and what the bees need. And it's all about just finding that perfect balance. Yes?
How do we know if there's enough flowers in our area to support a swarm, because they have to compete with the wild bees? And looking around, I really don't see that many flowers in my area.
Yeah, so the question is, how do you know when there's enough plants in your area to support honeybee colony? You don't. You put it in and you see what happens. Bees will give you signs. So, the more you do this, the more you see that there's supposed to be a progression of growth. So, in spring, their population grows. So when you saw that package of 12,000 bees, in 8 weeks, they're supposed to grow to about 40,000 bees. And if they can't reach that, then you know something's wrong. And it could be a failing queen, could be bad location, they could be getting attacked by yellowjackets or ants, or it could be a lack of natural resources in the area. It's hard to determine that until you start doing it and then you see the results. Yes?
I was just going to ask, when you do go into the hive, what is it you're doing? I mean, what is it you have to do to support the bees?
So what I do is open up a hive and I'm like, wow, that's always my first. I'm just amazed of what's happening. Half the time, I don't know what I'm doing. The other half is I fake it till I make it. You're looking for progression. You're looking for growth. So April, May, June, you're looking for growth. So you're looking for those bees to grow from 12,000 to 24,000 to 36,000 to 48,000, whatever the threshold is. Summer months, you're looking for steadiness. So they're maintaining the numbers of 48,000, whatever the colony is, 35, 40, 50,000, and they're bringing in pollen, and they're bringing in nectar. They start producing honey for you. And then in fall, the numbers start dwindle down because they don't want to go into winter with 50,000 bees because that requires a lot of food. In our area, it's estimated that you should leave 60 to 80 pounds of honey for them to overwinter on. The more bees, the more honey they require.
How do you get the honey out?
Yeah, I don't have a slide for that, but there's a couple ways you can do that. So bees, well, this is a honeycomb. Bees, when it's full of honey, and this was used for honey production, as a beekeeper you can tell when it's honey or not. This was used for honey production. So when they store nectar in here and they evaporate the moisture, honey is about 16 to 20% moisture, 18 on average. When the bees sense that there's about 18% moisture in it, they'll put wax cappings over that. So it greatly slows down the absorption of the moisture from the environment. So that honey doesn't spoil in the cell, doesn't become meat. So that's the first sign the bees tell you. Like, this is a honey. They put a capping, just a very light layer of wax cappings over this. As a beekeeper, you take that frame out when it's fully capped on both sides. Take a butter knife, or we have what we call uncapping knives, and just slice it very thinly. You're just trying to expose the honey. And then you can do a couple things. You can cut out the whole thing, crush and strain it. But remember, it takes them 8 pounds of honey to produce a pound of wax. So it's a waste of resources in some ways. You can put it in a centrifuge and just spin it out and extract it, and the honey will fly out and collect on the bottom. You put it through a strainer, filter, to kind of get the bigger bee parts and debris out, but not necessarily the pollen. I want to leave the pollen in there. I want my honey to be raw. Or you can just cut it into pieces and use it as a comb honey. So till about 100 years ago, all we knew was crush and strain or comb honey. There was no liquid honey. Now liquid honey is the most popular product.
So was that comb produced without a sheet of foundation? That's just a bee?
No, this one was produced with sheet of foundation. Yeah, there was a sheet of foundation inserted here. Yeah, and you can tell. I don't know if you guys can tell, but you can see very cool wires going into here. So those wires, they're metal wires. They're put in there for support. So when you spin it out, there's less chance of this comb bowing out and breaking and falling apart during extraction. So we can reuse it the way it came out. Yes?
We're current beekeepers within another town, and we're looking to move in the next handful of years. But is there any resource that exists in this area for knowing which towns have legal beekeeping or not?
Not as far as I know. I mean, statewide, there's a law that requires you to register your hives within 10 days of getting them, but each individual village or city has its own ordinance. Best way is to call and see if it's legal, or if even if it's not legal, see if there's an ordinance against it. Just because it says it's allowed doesn't mean it's not allowed. It's sort of a gray area. But as far as I know, there is no sort of a central database to say that Riverside allows it and Oak Park doesn't, and Skokie does, and Winnetka doesn't. As far as I know, it's not. But if you find it, let me know. I'd be interested.
On
Yes.
that point, I heard that in the village of Brookfield, they tried to shut down a beekeeper, and he brought up there was a state statute that allowed him, and they backed off. Can you comment about a state statute?
State allows you to do it, but they do refer back to local ordinance. That takes precedence over anything else. Yeah, it's your most common thing will be your neighbors. If your neighbors don't complain, chances are your city inspector is not going to your backyard and looking for a hive. I'm not saying you should break the law. I'm just saying. Somebody else had a hand up? Yes.
What happens in the winter? What's required of you in the winter?
As far as me, my last thing I do for bees, other than worrying about them between November and March, and this winter has been relatively mild. But we'll probably do our last inspection sometime in October, beginning of November, if we get a warm enough days and it's calm. The main thing you're looking for is that they have enough carbohydrates, they have enough honey, or if they're not up to weight. So if they don't have that 80 pounds, you feed them sugar water to get them up to weight. Hopefully you haven't over-harvested, and hopefully you're in a good enough area where the bees are able to forage on their own and make that on their own. So you're looking for food stores, that 60, 80 pound mark. You're also looking for signs of a healthy colony, so no overall mite pressure, very low mite counts, no signs of visible disease, and a healthy laying queen. The queen doesn't lay over well, I shouldn't say that. She'll slow down, and usually between, I would say, mid-November to about end of the year, she lays very little, if any, eggs. By about first of the year, she'll start laying patches of eggs. So she'll do a fistful, and she'll wait for 3 days, and then she'll do another fistful and wait, and then it starts ramping up. So right now, our queens, with the weather the way we have right now, they're ramping up. I mean, this is an early spring for our bees, which is a good thing and it's a bad thing. It depends how you look at it. But right now, the bees are getting into a full swing. So they're stimulating the queen to reach her full capacity as far as egg laying machines. So by mid-April, they want her laying at 2,000 eggs a day, if it's possible, if they have enough room and they have enough resources.
I thought we'd get one more question, and then we've got some, just so people know, Marcin will be here to take other questions in person. And John Bailey, who is often at the farmer's market with honey, is here too, is an area expert.
If you want to ask questions, ask John. He's been doing it for 40 years, and everything I've learned, whether good or bad, is from John.
Is there a beekeeper society? I mean, is there an internet?
There are groups, yeah. We host meetings every first Wednesday at the Garfield Park Conservatory from 6 to 8. John belongs to Kankakee Beekeepers, so they meet in the U of I Extension office in Kankakee.
I'd also say the West Side apiary experience.
Yes. Wax in Oak Park and River Forest. They're local to you, so they also are, there are local beekeeping clubs. Some of them meet more regularly, like we do at Conservatory. Some of them do it more sporadic, but there are options. The best resource probably would be go on Illinois State Beekeepers Association website, and they list all of the affiliate organizations in the area, and you can find like county-wide organizations.
I'd like to encourage another round of applause for Marcin.
Thank you.